Hi, this is Gay Gordon Byrne. I'm the Executive Director of the Repair Association, and you're listening to the Scene World Podcast.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. It's me. Joerg's there.
Yeah, here we go.
That's Elmi.
Hey, nice.
Say hi, Elmi. Elmi doesn't have any idea what's going on.
So, news.
Well, in a minute, before we get to that, before we start with our almost non-existent news, I've got more behind me than I did last time.
Nice.
See, I've got the Amiga is yes, my Spock. That is a vintage Spock T-shirt from like first edition from like back in like the 60s or 70s.
That is why it's barely recognizable.
Yes, and the Amiga is in the corner. I've got a 128 over here that is not yet hooked up.
Nice.
And then hanging out over here, out of sight, is a gaming PC that is modern, but nobody cares about those. Yeah. So, in a minute, who are we talking to?
Gunther Schmitz from Right to Repair South Africa, which is quite great because we never covered Africa before.
And I
think you told me once that in school Africa wasn't even on the map for your teachers.
It was on the map, but we weren't really. They didn't go much into African history or anything like that. Like we talked about like Egypt and stuff like that, but it wasn't really taught within the framework of Africa. But so this will be also a little right to repair redux. We'll be going back into this, and I'm hearing the horns as I speak.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we should mention that we recorded this a while back because since December, actually, South Africa, unfortunately, due to political problems, let's say it this way, they have a lot of power outages.
Okay.
So for hours per day or something. So, and this was recorded shortly before this incident with the corruption of the electricity industry happened. So we were lucky enough to do this shortly before this happened. So there are no interruptions on power during the interview. That was quite nice. Yeah. It's also the first time we did an interview that is not really covered or focused so much on computers because Right to Repair South Africa is mostly focusing on cars. So in this interview, AJ took the lead. Because I don't even own a car, so I had no idea what we were talking about, but AJ did a great job.
Well, and we talked about the vehicle aspect of it with Gay Gordon Byrne and a few others where, you know, it is an aspect, it is a major aspect of this because the car manufacturers are also trying to take the right to, or the ability to repair things away from people. And, you know, I use the Jeep adage. Jeep's in the garage right behind me right now getting fixed. So... because I lost my brakes because it's old, but the fact that I can go and do that and put that in myself and not have to worry about taking it somewhere or taking it back to the dealer and spending ludicrous amounts of money to fix something, and the fact that, you know, there's lots of stuff that you can do to these things is sort of what's disappearing now. Like the newer cars, you can't always do that to, and especially in places like, you know, as we're going to learn in South Africa, there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Which is interesting because people outside of Africa think that in Africa you can get everything because people are sticking to the old stuff. But it's not like that, not so easy at all.
Well, it's also funny to hear the disconnect between Africa and here because he was talking about, you know, what was it, a luxury car, a Chrysler. That's in the U.S. like the Chrysler is not a luxury car. You know, that's just a car, you know, but there it's considered something totally different. And same thing with Jeep. Here in the U.S., you know, Jeep almost dares you to do something to their car, to the car. You know, you buy it brand new and it's like, no, put huge lifts on it and giant tires and drive it into the lake and whatnot. It's cool. It's whatever. That's what it's built for.
Look at that.
Whereas over there, it's a whole different idea, a whole different ball game. They do not want you to do that, which blows my mind because that's what it's made for.
AJ about to get stuck in the water. Yes, he made it. Alright, my turn. Bye-bye.
But, you know, what are you going to do?
And speaking of Africa, maybe we should put the first kind of news that's related to that. Pleasant Green actually made a new series. We talked to him, Ben Tyler, a while ago, and he's actually now helping a person in need from Cameroon. And
Yes, he is.
yeah, so I don't know if you saw the videos I asked you to. When it came to Joel in Liberia, he actually sent a digital camera to him, so he could do photos and publish them in a book thanks to Indiegogo and the project being successfully funded. And in this case, this woman actually is good at drawing. He sent her money for getting an iPad and a pen. So she's going to draw, and let's see how that is going to get the $40,000 for the surgery in the US.
We'll see.
Ben Taylor is really big on this Africa thing.
Yes.
And, so
well,
we will definitely link to that. You definitely should watch it.
It's gonna be down there.
And it's
there.
It's starting with this is not a scam.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting story. So way to go, Ben. Really great.
Yeah, everyone should go look at it. Let's not give too much away about what happens and how it goes and whatnot, but everyone should look. The link is down there or over there or somewhere. It's somewhere down there to go look for that.
Okay, so Demoscene related. We got other news too, and that would be 2 magazines have been released in January. And the first one would be Attitude, which is released by Triad and Genesis Project.
Right.
Issue 20. And the other one is Rock and Roll 33. By the Riders of the Lost Empire Roll. And interesting, I didn't know about that they were actually working on it. So, really great, you know. Roll is like the biggest Demoscene group when it comes to members, but not really that active.
That's what, you know, RPG, the demo group that I guess I'm still in actually. That's what it was like when I joined. We had a roster that was ludicrous. We had like 25 people, and nobody knew how to get in touch with any of them. Like they were long gone, but we just kept them around. So.
Yeah, but actually in this case, so Rock and Roll 32 was released in 2018, so 2 years ago, and Rock and Roll 31 was released in 2003.
Okay, well.
That's quite a gap.
It is, yes.
You know, that's quite a gap.
But hey, it's getting done. We're not the only disc mag left, I guess.
Yeah,
because others still doing it.
And other news in the disc magazine world, Digital Talk, the German magazine, actually announced that it's going to stop. And Digital Talk, as the name is implying already, is a German disc mag, and it's called a talk disc mag because you had messages like between sceners. And you would get answers to your messages in the next issue. And this talking aspect, and the staff who took over didn't really, motivate people to go on with that. So those kind of messages were getting smaller in the amount of the newer issues. Of course, they also did other things like game reviews, party reports, and all that stuff, all in German. It's pretty sad to see a German disc mag go, because I had it connected to my early C64 days, and it's sad, but that's the way it goes. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's jump to
Yes.
Africa.
Whoosh.
This evening, actually, today, we are talking to Gunther Schmitz from Right to Repair South Africa. Hello, Gunther. Nice to
Hi,
meet
Joerg.
you.
Hello, nice to meet you.
And in the call is also AJ.
Yes, like usual.
So, yeah, like usually.
Hi,
It's
AJ.
interesting because actually in your signature you say German Autoworks.
Mhm.
And in your homepage biography, it also says you studied in Munich.
Mhm.
So I guess this Right to Repair South Africa has a connection with Germany in a way.
Well, actually, maybe to the extent that I was exposed to the kind of right to repair legislation, which started in the European Union while I was still working in Germany, and then I came to South Africa in 2007, and I started in my own business workshops, and I joined the Motor Industry Workshop Association, and they kind of spearheaded the topic of right to repair in South Africa. And because I'd kind of seen some of it in Europe before, I got involved there, and then was kind of made chairman of the Right to Repair South Africa campaign. So it's kind of my hobby or my part-time job that I'm doing besides running my normal business.
I see.
Now we
So
talked
it's-
about
yeah.
sorry. Well, we talked to a few other people for Right to Repair a couple of months ago when we did our Right to Repair month, and this is our kind of extension of that, I suppose. And when we started looking at this, we were mostly looking at phones and laptops and stuff like consumer electronics, which are not repairable and or are being now made not to be repairable. So when we talked to Gay Gordon Byrne a couple months ago, she mentioned the fact that the right to repair movement was actually like a lot of automobile stuff and farm equipment, which I never even thought of. A tractor is a tractor, and it never occurred to me that this sort of thing would translate to that, but it is.
Yeah, I think the origin, and I think that's where the right to repair movement started, was in the automotive industry, and obviously a car is an expensive investment, and there's a lot of there are a lot of independent repairers out there and have been for many decades, and then what the independent repair industry started experiencing was that the manufacturers tried to close off the market, keep it to themselves, with the objective of selling only their spare parts, and the side effect was that sometimes it just became unviable to repair a car, so it just got too expensive to keep an older car on the road, and also they started pushing the independent repairers out of the marketplace. So that's where in the US and Europe, the independent repairers started to counter that, and got the first legislation on the way about 15, 20 years ago, just to kind of to make sure that they stay in business. And obviously, a positive side effect to that is that, especially in a country like South Africa, where parts are very expensive, but the labor is a lot cheaper than Europe, is that it becomes economically viable to keep a car for longer, to keep it running. So it benefits the consumer to a great extent as well, because it allows more competition, but also it allows different repair methods. Just to give you an example, we just had a BMW X6 in where one of the handbrake actuators didn't work anymore. So it's an electric parking brake, so there's a little motor which applies the brake. BMW's repair method is you replace the new actuator, which is, well, in South Africa about 20,000 rand, so that's in euro term about 1,200, 1,300 euros. So we took the thing out, took it apart, got found some videos overseas of guys who had repaired them before, and it was basically just a contact broken off on the motor. So that's the kind of thing we're dealing with, and especially in South Africa, where the labor rate is maybe 30, 40 euros an hour. You can easily spend 10 hours on something like that to repair it,
Right.
before buying a new part. Which is not always the case in Germany and the US, but even there, it's more and more often the case that it makes sense to repair those components. While the manufacturer's philosophy is you replace the whole component. But where we are struggling more and more is that these components get programmed into the network of the car. So where it gets more and more difficult is that these components get programmed as part of the whole CAN bus network of the car. And then when you've done a repair, or where, for example, sometimes you can replace the little motor as well, which you get for about 30 euros overseas, you can't, it doesn't work in the car anymore because you need the coding. And that's kind of one of the things we're fighting for, to get access to those to the information, and that this coding is opened up not just to the manufacturers but to the independent aftermarket. Or basically, what we're saying is the person who bought the car, it's his car, so therefore he should have the right to have access to that information. And there's also, you mentioned John Deere and the tractors earlier. That's exactly the issue that the farmers have, on why they are quite supportive of the right to repair campaign in the US. They've got a harvester, and those things you're talking about way over $100,000. And then there've been cases where they just need a software update, or where they need some programming done, and the John Deere dealership charges them $4,000 to do something like that.
Right.
While it's basically just plugging in a computer, getting access to the information, and you're busy. It's a process of maybe 1 or 2 hours.
Yeah, it's for me astounding that a farmer has suddenly to deal with software and firmware updates for his vehicles. I mean, unlike you are from a newer generation, I don't know if they ever dealt with computer and software stuff or hacks in the past. I guess that is also the change of the modern world, and suddenly you are confronted with a new problem, because I guess they usually have this mindset of, okay, I'm just replacing my old tractor with a new tractor. It shouldn't make a lot of difference, and suddenly it is making a lot of difference.
Well, I don't think that happens very often, though, because I see, when you buy a tractor, that's an investment. You're going to have that thing for years and years and years, or a harvester, or whatever else you're using, because they cost a boatload of money. And I guess, as with everything else, they get more complicated as they go along. Like I said, in my brain, a tractor is a tractor. I've got an old Jeep that I work on all the time. And when people ask me about it, I usually explain it's basically a tractor engine. It's simple. There's not really much in it. But evidently, tractor engines are much more complicated than I have been led to believe all these years.
Well, I mean, these days, you get the tractor, so you get on or even the equipment that plants the seeds. They're GPS controlled, and they change the distance of how the seeds are planted depending on the kind of soil and the amount of water you get at a certain spot. So basically, as the farmer drives over the field, the planting machine doesn't just put the same amount of seeds in every square meter. It varies that depending on the soil and depending on the water and the light the plants will get at that spot.
Right.
So obviously, which is to me that's great technology, because now you're optimizing without using fertilizers and things like that. You're optimizing use of the ground, but obviously that's it's high tech equipment that you need
right.
To do that.
So what is the argument that the dealers are making, or not the dealers, but the manufacturers are making for why people shouldn't have the access to do this?
Well, the standard argument in South Africa that we come across is that they say it's not safe. The quality isn't going to be okay. You're going to have people hacking into it. People are going to fit lesser quality parts. That's the typical argument. But there's, I think, well, from our point of view, number one, it's not the manufacturer's decision. It's like the consumer bought the car. It's his decision how he has his car repaired. I think that should be just a general vital principle if you live in a free world. You can't have somebody prescribing to you what you do to something that you bought. Then it's up to the legislator to say, for example, for certain brake pads, and the international regulations on that, to make sure that obviously brake pads have to fill certain safety criteria, but these regulations are there. They're in place all over the world. So that's up to the legislator to enforce that. And also with regard to the hacking, I mean, what I can see here, especially in South Africa, where for a lot of things we don't get access. Well, we do get access after all, but then it's normally with a hacked version from China or from Russia, which if you obviously when you've got a established business with a reputation, that's not really what you want to use. You would much rather go to the manufacturer and say, listen, send me the equipment, let me get access to your software. Here are the IDs. These are the person that's going to do it. You can do all the security checks and vetting of the person that you do with your own dealerships. But as I said, at the moment, they don't allow us to. So then you go on the internet and you find the information, you get it.
Right.
But as I said, it's not always the channels you would ideally want to use, but you get forced to use those channels. And I think, to be quite honest, I think there's even a side effect of that, is that suddenly the market for these hacked tools actually becomes much bigger. So for the people that are up to no good, they have access to more technology.
Right.
Well, if the manufacturers would just open it up and control it, there would be much better checks in place, and you could make sure that there's the established businesses with a registered address where you've got IDs of people using it. They have access, and people who are up to no good, you could exclude them.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned at the beginning that, as you said, in South Africa, it's even harder to get certain information or certain parts shipped to you. So is it kind of that in this whole discussion of right to repair, Africa is kind of neglected or something? Or in a second row? Because personally, I have to say, for us, it's the first time we do an interview with somebody from South Africa. Normally, people don't have Africa in the picture. They mostly think about Europe and America.
Yeah, and people need to also realize that Africa, when you think of Africa, you think of, the savannah and lions and stuff like that. And it really is not, that's not what all of Africa is. I've known... I've known some people who have gone to South Africa. Hi, Jen. And it's very, it's very industrialized, very modern, very, it's the sort of thing, same kind of thing you'd expect from Europe or North America, except that the cream soda is green for some reason.
It's true. Obviously, there is quite advanced technology and industry in South Africa as well, but also even in other parts of Africa. I mean, if you think about Angola or Nigeria, on their oil rigs, they use modern technology. The shipping industry, they use modern technology. Mm-hmm. So obviously, it's not as you get rural areas where you've got very little technology, but still, even there, it's coming in more and more. And especially, if you take, for example, cell phones. Cell phones have play a far more important role in Africa than than in Europe, for example, US, because there is no other telephone network. So, there is no banking facility. So that's why the first cell phone banking apps came from Africa, because there wasn't any other facility to transfer money.
Right.
You also were quoted saying in January, I saw that it at the platform saying BIS community, and you said right to repair is not just for the motor industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic, as I said, it was started in the motor industry because of the motor industry being a kind of an old industry, very advanced. But some aspects of right to repair actually stem from different industry. For example, in the US, you've got the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act, which came up when the first PC started being widespread, and people wanted to make changes to that PC, and at that stage some manufacturer said, oh no, but if you open that box up, your warranty is void, doesn't matter what happens. And that's, I think, on the US, the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act came about, saying that if just because you fitted a different component to your equipment, whatever it is, doesn't matter if it's a car or if it's a computer, or have it repaired by somebody independent, they can't use it as an argument to void the whole warranty of the equipment.
Right.
So, but in South Africa, it's kind of when we started the discussion around right to repair, there was still the mindset that no, but only the motor industry you want that. It's no other industry does it. But we quickly corrected them and said, no, just and also just because other industry also block the consumer from having his equipment repaired doesn't make it right. It's not a good argument.
And we're seeing it more and more because the new Apple laptops are coming out with security chips in there that will block you from using any components that are not Apple, approved. And there's evidently a diagnostics tool that doesn't exist outside of Apple authorized dealers. Even the Apple stores don't have them.
In a free competitive market environment, you should get access to those tools. I'm very much a supporter of free markets, but that shouldn't just apply to government opening up the market. It should actually just as much apply to government making sure that big players don't close off the market for their own purpose. I think that's where government has to play a very important role.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder who is the most exhausting motor company when it comes to car, for example, compared to Apple. I mean, for example, AJ always says like Ford is always open to help and says like, okay, you can modify your car, no problem.
No. I never said that.
Wasn't it?
No, that was Jeep.
Jeep. Okay.
Which is
Jeep?
actually, but that falls under, because that's owned by Fiat, which but it's only the Jeep division of that, which is like, you want to break something, go ahead. If you want to put giant tires on it, whatever, that's cool. You're still under warranty. If you tried to do it with a Fiat 500, I'm sure that they would not be happy about that at all.
You see, I think, but it depends on the market as well. Because I would have thought, also from my experience in Germany, that the German manufacturers, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes are the ones that are most closed off. But in South Africa, we've actually experienced almost the opposite. Volkswagen has been the first company to say that for Volkswagen and Audi, if you use an independent repair or independent service company, it's not going to void the warranty. While here in South Africa, we find that Jeep Chrysler is actually being extremely restrictive, but probably also because of it's a smaller market. It depends on the importer. So I think it's very much depend on the market where the companies are active. If you take Toyota, for example, in California, they love selling the Prius as the hybrid model, while in many African countries they love selling their big Land Cruisers with the V8 engines. They adopt very much to the market and whatever. whatever gives them a good image there, that's what they'll do.
It's interesting talking to so many people in this field, how much connected you are, you know. You know a lot about the German market, obviously, but also about the American market. And also when we asked Gay, she also said like, oh yeah, I know some people in North Africa who do this also. So it seems like you are interconnected from all over the place.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. There is a international right repair coalition, which is again kind of in the motor industry. I hope it's going to start spreading to other industries as well, and which is kind of also was spearheaded together with the colleagues from the US and from Europe. But there's also Australians on board, South Africans, and trying to think. There was another country which was one of the founding members, but now we've got members from Brazil, from Russia, from China has recently joined in. So it's spreading to all the developing countries. I think all the developed countries, they all have it, but all the developing countries are catching on now as well. And as I said in the beginning, I think especially in the developing countries, it's even more important because we've got less dense networks. If we've got lower labor rates, but the parts are not always readily available, and issues like that. I mean, for example, something you would never consider in Germany, but in South Africa, you get towns where you have to drive over 1,000 kilometers to get to the next Citroen dealership. Now imagine you're there you've got a Citroen, and you're forced for the first 5 years to drive 1,000 kilometers for every single repair and service. Right. It's like it's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a bit like Apple stores in Germany. They are pretty far away, you know. And when I call to Apple Germany support, they said like, "Oh, you can go to the next Apple store." I'm like, "Well, the next Apple store is 400 kilometers away. Thank you." So yes, I can understand that. Yeah. So are there any success stories your association made in the recent years?
We had the competition commission started investigating, and then they called kind of all the stakeholders, industry, different parts of the industry, the insurance industry, the automobile associations on board, and asked them for their input. Then they came up with a kind of like a voluntary code of conduct, which they kind of asked all the manufacturers to sign. But then after trying it for a year, they said, okay, we're not getting any further with this because except for BMW and Volkswagen, I think it was those two, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was those two, nobody wanted to sign that voluntary code. But now the Competition Commission has said, okay, if that's the case, then we're going to publish guidelines. And I think that's actually even better for us because it's even almost a stronger tool than a voluntary code of conduct. If you look at the European Union, for example, there's also the Commission says we've got the competition law enshrined in the European Treaty, and here these are guidelines how we interpret that treaty with regard to your industry. And I think that's luckily one thing is now manufacturer is keen on being investigated by the Competition Commission, and I think it's similar to that in South Africa. So now we're currently waiting for that for those guidelines, but we're quite confident that that's going to have a major effect on the market. And what we can actually see now from a business point of view is that a lot of manufacturers are starting to change the way they're interacting. They're starting to make certain special tools available, even borrowing them to independent repairers, which never happened in the past. In the past, they weren't even allowed to hand it out. Now it's supported from certain manufacturers that they borrow those tools, so you can do the repairs. Some of them, others are still kind of blocking everything.
So the goal is to make it necessary for all car manufacturers to at least give some level of support and parts and right to repair to, well, third-party garages.
Mm-hmm. Well, the goal is actually, we've got I think part of right repair covers various aspects. I mean, the overarching aspects that we say the market must be open to anybody that wants to repair a certain motor vehicle. And I think the same principle can be applied to other industries as well. And the first aspect of that is that if a car is under warranty, then the warranty shouldn't be voided just because another person worked on the car. I mean, there's no logical reason why if somebody fits brake pads on a car and the engine fails, that they say, no, but your warranty is voided because somebody else fitted the brake pads. I mean, it's like just so.
Right.
Obviously, if somebody does a service and he puts the wrong oil in the car and the engine seizes, yes, then it's then the manufacturer can very easily prove and say, but listen, this is the reason for the engine seizing, and we don't cover that. So that's all fair and reasonable. Mm-hmm. The second aspect in South Africa is, and I think that's a specific South African thing, is a lot of cars in South Africa are sold with a so-called motor plane or extended warranty. So when you buy a new car, and especially the luxury cars, BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, Land Rover, Chrysler, then for the first 5 years,
wait. Did you lump Chrysler in with luxury cars?
Yeah, it's in South Africa they consider it a luxury car.
Oh my God!
We also have GWM and Tata here. So for the first 5 years, you're locked in with the manufacturer. So that's the second aspect where we say, okay, if you want to sell an add-on product like that, it's fine. But the consumer, when he buys the car, should be able to choose and say, no, actually, I've got my independent garage that I want to use, or I want to service my own car. I just want to buy the car from you, or if he says, well, you know what, great, I'll buy the extended warranty and the service plan with it, then it's a separate product. Third aspect is then access to technical information and tools. The parts we normally do get, there are actually also certain parts we also don't get access, but that's a very small part. But access to technical information for repairs, to special tools, and special tools that we include the programming and software updates. And then the last aspect, which is we kind of got on the radar, it's more topic in Europe at the moment, is the topic of telematics, or basically where if you got a modern car these days and it's due for service or you need brake pads, it will tell you on the display. And nowadays it will not just tell you on the display, it will tell you, by the way, here's your nearest dealership, and should we make a booking for you, and we'll just send that information to the dealership. So that's also it's on a topic of telematics, where we also, again, in competition law, it would be considered as unfair practice to send the customer there to a specific network and not open it up to anybody competing in that market space. Similar to Google had that issue with their directing certain searches to their own price comparison website.
Right.
So those are kind of the aspects that we're tackling. And as I said, I think it's thinking about other industries, we probably have similar topics in any industry. I mean, if you've got obviously for farming equipment, the same would apply, but also for a stove or a fridge.
Now,
there was, by the way, just thinking of a very interesting. One of the arguments that was brought up by the dealerships, not by the manufacturers in South Africa, was that they said that in the aircraft industry, it would never be allowed that an independent repairer services an aircraft. But then just a bit of research, and we counted that actually quite the opposite. The aircraft industry, Boeing and Airbus, doesn't even feature under the top 10 companies for servicing aircraft.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I read the same about Lufthansa recently. Yeah.
So there you've got an industry which is really safety critical, where you don't want anything going wrong. Obviously, there are rules in place by the aviation authorities who's allowed to do what on the aircraft and when you have to service it, etc. But there's nobody saying, no, but it has to be Boeing or Airbus or Bombardier doing it.
Right. Yeah, and usually, generally speaking, at least here in the U.S., the service that's done in the aircraft are done by the airport personnel.
Yeah.
You know, just people that happen to work there that aren't aligned with, Boeing or any of the manufacturers. They just happen to work at the airport.
I guess the main difference here is if you repair whatever, if it's a car, a tractor, or an iPhone or whatever, if you repair it yourself as a layman who has no idea, who can barely hold a screwdriver, or if you are a qualified technician. I guess that is the difference here. And
but I mean, it shouldn't make a difference if I go out and I want to fix my car and I have no idea. Because that's what generally when something breaks on my car, the fun part of it is, let's see if I can figure out how to fix this. And so I'll go out and I'll mess around with it until I can try to figure it out. And you look it up online. There's YouTube videos, people doing it and whatnot. And generally speaking, again, my car is exceedingly simple, so it's not that difficult to do too much on it. But I mean, that does carry over to a lot of different vehicles where even if you don't know how to do it and you want to learn how to do it, and if you decide that you're going to go out and mess with the thing, you should be allowed to break your own stuff, essentially. If that's what if you don't know what you're doing and you break it, oh well, I broke it. That's my fault, and that you obviously reap the consequences. Your warranty might be expired or whatever, but you should have that right to be able to service it yourself, whether you know what you're doing or not.
I fully agree. I think it's just it should be the consumer's right to choose where he has it repaired. And I mean, as I said, I'm in the industry, so obviously I prefer consumers bringing their cars to me or one of my colleagues. I don't want to repair it yourself, but again, it should be your right to repair it yourself. Mm-hmm. And if it's something you enjoy, who's going to stop you? I mean, I love baking bread. So are the bakers going to come up with laws now to say you're not allowed to bake your own bread? You have to buy it from us because it's not safe. You may get fungus in there. It's the same principle.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have that, where I am in the U.S., in New Jersey, there's a law in place, and I've talked about this quite a few times, where you're not allowed to pump your own gas. And the reason behind it is that it's unsafe, that handling gasoline, could cause a fire and all this stuff. But every other state, there's 50 states in this country, every place else you're allowed to pump your own gas. And people aren't bursting into flames everywhere. But for some reason, just the population of this state is evidently too stupid to handle gasoline.
Well, in Germany, you don't even have the service of getting somebody to put the gas in for you.
Right. That's most of what you have elsewhere. If I go to a different state, there's nobody there to help. There's someone inside if you got to pay for, or if you're disabled, you can push a button and someone will come out and do it for you. But generally speaking, you do it yourself. But where I am, nope, you're not allowed to. If you get out and you didn't even touch the thing, there's signs everywhere like it's a federal offense or something to touch this thing, and don't even think about it and whatnot. And then when we spoke to Gay, she was talking about where she was, and I can't remember. I think it was New York, because they're trying to stop people from leaving it unattended because. When you pump your gas, you put the thing in, you click it back, and it locks in, and you walk away and do whatever you got to do. Well, they took away that locking mechanism, and so it took all of about 10 minutes before someone realized that they could just kind of stick their gas cap in there and keep it going, But still, like this idea that something is unsafe and that we shouldn't be allowed to do it because of that. And I lost my train of thought. How did I get on this?
Well, actually, I learned for electric cars, there
Yes.
are certain certifications you need because
Yes.
of the high voltage batteries and so
Right.
on.
Well, and certain things like safety issues, like maybe I don't know. I can't even think of obviously for safe there's certain safety things you don't want to modify the car in certain
Brakes, for
ways.
example.
Right, exactly. Well, no, because I should be able to change my brakes. I shouldn't be able to remove my brakes, which I have done. But I don't know. I don't know. There's
Yeah,
there's
no,
there's hammering outside my house and it's totally throwing my brain off.
I, I agree. I think it's again, it's obviously you need certain qualification in place, especially if you work on other people's equipment.
Yes.
I think that's all good and fair, but again, that qualification, the standards of that should be set, by the laws of whatever state or country you're living in. It shouldn't be left up to the manufacturer of that equipment to decide
Right.
on that. It shouldn't be their prerogative.
Right. In other words, like you can fix whatever you want in your car. You might not be able to. Might not be allowed to drive it, but you certainly have the right to do it. You just can't, it's just not street legal because the government says no. You need brake lights or you need your doors on or something like that. But it's within my right to go and remove those things and just not drive the car.
Yeah, I mean, it's like as I said, it's an aviation industry. They've got very clear qualifications who's allowed to work on the aircraft. But again, it doesn't really stop somebody unqualified from working on the aircraft.
Right.
He's not allowed to, but
Yeah.
if a company is reckless and says, well, we don't want to pay for this expensive Lufthansa technicians. We found some, cheap guys standing on the side of the street, and they're going to do the repair for us. Then you hope that the aviation authority is going to step in and to shut them down. But it's the legislator, the regulator. You should put that in place, and not
Right.
not the manufacturer of equipment.
Right.
Interestingly, at the beginning you mentioned that China recently joined the international right to repair movement, and that's really surprising for me because I thought China is more like governmental controlled.
Yeah, but in China, obviously, you also get the car manufacturers and you get the repairers. So it's from the repair side, from the independent repairers, which are mostly, I think, all over the world, very small businesses. So they are kind of looking into that topic. They just started. They were at the when was it? Last year, I think 2 years ago. Last year at the Auto Mechanic in Frankfurt at the Right Repair Conference as well.
Yeah, interesting. Especially as you mentioned, third world countries that are also stepping in now. I guess that's also because in those countries people are more focused on repairing rather than buying new because of the income level you have.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, if I compare South Africa and Germany directly, in South Africa, the labor rate in the workshop is maybe about 40, 50 euros. That's already, you get, it even goes quite a lot below that, but then not necessarily qualified, or there's more people kind of working from home. But for established business with a qualified technician who's got all the tools, etc. While in Germany, you're probably looking at 160 euros an hour, 180 euros an hour at a dealership. So that's kind of 3 to 4 times the price. While the spare parts are normally half the price in Germany. So now we're in Germany, it just doesn't make sense to repair a component. We just swap it out, put a new component in from a financial point of view. In South Africa, it just makes sense to repair it. especially if the car is older. When you say, okay, this repair actually, it might only last for 2-3 years, not for another 8 or 10 years, but the car is already 12, 14 years old.
Right.
So
And that's the same
are
here.
there?
The parts are fairly inexpensive here, but the dealerships are always, they cost so much more than an independent shop. We always like to we call them stealerships because they are. I mean, you're paying easily 5 or 6 times more than you would at a regular independent repair shop, depending on where you are, to fix the same thing. And usually it's just a matter of, taking out a module and sticking in another one, and then you walk away. And again, at the dealership, that little resistor or something costs $70, but I can go to an auto parts store in town and order it for 15. And it's the same manufacturer, same company that makes it too. There's no difference in quality.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is, and that's also we actually added that as one of our objectives for right repair in South Africa. Obviously, the dealerships they have to comply with a lot of rules set up by the OEMs, and that makes it very expensive for them.
Right.
So we kind of, part of our agenda is also to say we want to kind of level the playing field a bit in that complete supply chain, in that repair chain between the manufacturers and the dealerships and the part suppliers. Because to a certain extent you can't really blame the dealerships, because they're sometimes forced to buy extremely expensive equipment. I mean, in South Africa now, for Audi, they request all the so-called approved panel beaters or chassis repairers to have aluminium welding bay. That's equipment that's you're looking at close to 100,000 euros. That each of them has to have, but there is actually, I think, not even half a dozen aluminium Audis on the road in South Africa. So now you've got something like 50 shops which have to buy this equipment for 100,000 euros. But you've got no cars that are going to go on there. And so now those poor guys have to make that money up somewhere, and that's where so all they can do is push up the price for the other cars.
Right. And plus, I don't know how dealerships work outside of the U.S. I know in the U.S. a lot of times you get a quota from the manufacturer on how many cars you need to sell. And towards the end of that month, or towards the end of that time period when you need to sell it, the dealerships will take a loss just to move the cars, even if it means that they're losing money on it. Because if they don't sell the vehicles, if they don't sell a certain number, then they lose support from the manufacturer, and it's a whole process. So they have to recoup that from the money that they're losing from having to buy equipment, the money they're losing from having to move cars that they can't afford to move, and they got to get it back somewhere. So then, your service department, we charge exorbitant rates and try to find things that aren't actually wrong, and that's how you manage to stay in business. And it's not a great system. I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down, and how the dealerships, or how the manufacturers are screwing the dealerships on this. But yeah, there's lots of issues with that.
Yeah, well, I think again, it's if you look at it from a economic point of view and from a market perspective, it's not good for the market. It's not good because now obviously the dealerships, they start going down that, or the manufacturers start going down that route, because they can make their they can reduce the price of the car when they sell it, make up on the price when they or make up for that when they sell spare parts and when they sell equipment to the dealerships. And if one starts it, then the others have to follow. And it's a bit like like the printer industry, where they sell you a printer for almost next to nothing, but then they make the money on the cartridges. That's actually quite interesting. I find in the printer industry there seems to be a bit of a certain segment of the market, a bit of a reverse trend, where you get the refillable ink printers where you can just pour in your own ink. So, but again, I think that's where I wish that the government would would kind of make sure that competition really works, and just stop any form of anti-competitive behavior, because there's quite interesting studies out there that in the end it harms the economy as a whole. When you start, when building inefficiencies like that into the economy, it's not good for anybody in the long run.
Right.
So what's the next step, the next goal you have?
Well, first goal is kind of getting those guidelines out there from the Competition Commission, and then obviously we have to start monitor the manufacturers and educate the public, educate the workshops out there, the independent workshops, and just tell them, listen, okay, if you come across those things, that's uncompetitive behavior, submit a complaint to the Competition Commission so that they stop it.
Right.
I think that's the next step, and then from a long-term point of view, that in terms of what else we want to get in there is the topic of telematics. So that's in the current kind of code of conduct that we've seen. That's not covered yet, but I think also in South Africa we're not as far yet as Europe or the US with that type of topic. But I think it's something we have to keep an eye on, and probably ideally start tackling it before it's widespread in the industry.
So how can people help, actually?
Well, I think, you see right repair movements, I think, all over the world now, and I think it doesn't matter what industry it's in. So I think it's any type of support for those movements on, just liking it on Facebook, sharing it. I think all those things are positive. And obviously something, unfortunately, we don't have in South Africa, but what you have in the US is sometimes where the population, I think Massachusetts, that was the case, where the population was asked to vote on the right repair bill. So kind of, help to campaign the politicians, make them aware why this is an important topic. And just if you ever contact two politicians, talk to them about it, or if you don't, just kind of a like on Facebook also helps.
Right.
Yeah, you wanted to ask something, AJ.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
I was just going to say that as a service provider for vehicles, how do you feel about how they're making them more vehicles have become more disposable? Again, mine is 23 years old, and it's got almost 400,000 kilometers on it, and it's still chugging away, no problem. And the cars they make now, a lot of these things, they have, the gearboxes are sealed, and it's lifetime fluid. You never have to change it. But again, they're putting in a defined lifetime. What's the lifetime of a vehicle? And they're becoming almost like consumer electronics now, in which you're supposed to have them for 5 years, throw them away, and get a new one. And the idea of keeping something running for 20, 25, 30 years, that's not a consideration anymore. Now it's all about you make this thing that's kind of cheaply made, it's going to fall apart in 5 or 10 years, and then you can't even service the parts that it's got. Is that frustrating?
Well, I think, to be honest, I do think it's also the consumer wanting that. There are a lot of people out there. If you look at the people buying new cars, they normally keep them for 3 to 5 years, and then they buy another new car. And the same with, I must admit, I'm an iPhone user, and when it comes to my iPhone, I'm the type of person I buy a new one every 2 years. It comes with a contract, and
right.
Even I don't even all the new functionalities and what it can do, I don't really use, but. So I think there is it's I don't think the manufacturers are doing that because of it's because they want to destroy the environment or because they don't care. It is, to be quite honest, I think the consumer is often asking for that because it's convenient. So I think it would be good if the consumers sometimes think about more: do they really need that, or do they really want that? But then obviously there's always a second market. I mean, we know all cars, they always get sold on to another user where people keep the same car for a long period of time. So for those users, there should be the possibility to repair those products. And same with cell phones. I mean, I don't throw my phone away after you've used it for 2 years. It gets passed on, and especially in Africa, I mean, phones have a much longer lifespan. And again, I think also it should be there should be a bit of an obligation on the manufacturer to make sure that actually the lifespan is there. It's not that you can get a screen. And you know what? If Apple doesn't want to produce screens for phones older than 5 years, that's fine. I'm sure there's other companies out there that will gladly produce that screen, but then make your iPhone in such a way that you can put that other screen on there, not just the Apple screen. I think, and that's to me, that's the job of the lawmaker, to put those rules in place and say, okay, listen, Apple, you know what? You must allow other manufacturers to produce screens for your phone as well. We're not going to force you to produce screens for those phones for the next 30 years, but open up the market, let the market decide what they want.
Right. Well, from my side, I got it all covered.
Yeah. So is there a website or something that people can go to find out how they can help and what you're doing, where you are, and follow along with this?
Well, specifically for South Africa, we got the rightrepair.za.org website. That's right, then the number 2 repair.org.za. And then otherwise, I think if you, as I said, we at the moment just active in the motor industry, but anybody Googling Right Repair, I think will find plenty of information from all over the world. And I think it's very exciting. I love it. I mean, as I said, I do that it's my hobby.
Right.
Well, I found it very interesting to also see an African perspective from it. And that is also why I was so much looking forward to get also your side of it, because normally it's just Europe and America, and the rest is kind of not pictured.
Right.
And
I think another interesting area might be Eastern Europe. I find these days when you look for repair methods, often you find something on YouTube coming from Eastern Europe. They're very, they're very clued up at figuring something out, repairing something that in Germany you would just throw away and buy new. So.
Oh yeah. As a kid of the 90s, I remember that throw away, buy new thing. And nowadays things are so rare and expensive on eBay because we did throw them away in the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's with the auto industry too. We had a couple of years back, there was a Cash for Clunkers program in the U.S. that it provided like a refund or money off a new car if you traded in an old car that was between a certain age and had a certain miles per gallon and whatnot. And so a lot of vehicles from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s were destroyed because people were getting them and turning them over into this program, and it totally wrecked the used car market. You used to be able to go out and find a used car for $1,000 or less, and now you can't find anything for under $2,000 that runs and works. People are selling piles of rust, $2,000. Just needs a little work.
It's still a trophy. My grandfather used it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Ran the last time we tried it. Needs some TLC. It's like a seat and a steering wheel, one wheel, and some rust.
Great. Yeah. Alrighty. Thanks for taking the time,
Okay.
Gunther.
No, pleasure. And it was nice chatting to you guys. It was a nice, interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I learned a lot today about cars too.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Cheers, guys. Good
All right,
night.
thank you
Cheers.
much.
Bye
Well,
bye.
okay. Good morning to you.
That's true.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that was
Yeah.
Gunther Schmitz from Right to Repair South Africa. Joerg's got the homepage, so he's going to tell us what it is.
Yes, so it's right. That's written out as a word. To repair, also a word. .org.za. So righttorepair.org.za.
We will put links to all of that in the description. They also have Twitter. They've got all sorts of other stuff, and we will link to everything. You
Yes.
should be seeing it on the screen right now. If you're watching the video version of this, which you should.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
You know where to find us. It's podcast, rather. It's podcast@sceneworld.org.
Exactly.
And,
Sceneworld.org is our homepage.
Mhm.
And we
So-
are on Instagram, Sceneworld64.
Yeah, but
We
they all
are
know that.
Twitter, scene_world.
But it's not about us.
And we are also on Facebook, Sceneworld64.
Mhm.
The intro is getting longer, and it's like
The outro is getting longer.
the outro too.
Yeah. So until next time, we'll see you. Thanks for sitting with us.
Bye bye.